Imagine waking up every morning in a world where simply loving someone the wrong way could land you in prison, or worse, at the stake. You walk the narrow, cobbled streets of your town, wearing a simple woolen tunic, pretending to admire the local baker's daughter, all while knowing that if anyone suspected the truth, you'd be lucky to escape with your life. That's what it meant to be a homosexual in the Middle Ages. But it's not the whole picture. There's so much more to the hidden lives of queer people in medieval Europe, and much of it might surprise you. Let's go back, not to a single year or country, but to a time period that stretched from the 5th to the 15th century. A time of crusades, monasteries, plagues, feasts, and inquisitions. A time where love, desire, identity, and fear collided behind closed doors, and within candlelit confessionals. You might think everyone in the Middle Ages hated and hunted homosexuals. And yes, there were laws, brutal punishments, and fiery sermons. But here's the thing, despite the danger, queer people still found each other. They still wrote poetry. They still fell in love. Some even thrived in places no one would expect. Let's start in 12th century France. Paris, though far smaller than today, was already bustling with merchants, students, and clergy. Universities were growing. Monasteries were filled with books, ink, and whispers. Among the clergy, particularly monks and scholars, deep emotional bonds were often formed between men. Letters survived, actual letters, written by monks to one another, filled with longing, tenderness, even erotic undertones. These weren't just friendly notes. These were passionate, intimate expressions of love, written in flowing Latin script, sealed with wax, and hidden in cloistered chambers. But outside of monasteries, life wasn't so kind. For ordinary people, peasants, artisans, merchants, any deviation from the expected roles of husband and wife, man and woman, was dangerous. Punishments varied. In England, under the 1533 Buggery Act, though later than the medieval period proper, sodomy was punishable by death. Earlier church codes weren't much more forgiving. In parts of Germany, repeat offenses could lead to castration. In some Italian cities, a convicted man could be publicly flogged, have his head shaved, and be paraded through the streets on a donkey, a humiliating and terrifying sentence. But here's where it gets complicated. Medieval societies were obsessed with what people did, not necessarily how they identified. The concept of being gay didn't exist. What mattered was the act, not the label. And because of that, there was a strange sort of space, dangerous, yes, but still a space, where people could explore same-sex relationships without being permanently branded. It was risky, secretive, and coded, but it existed. But here's where it gets complicated. Medieval societies were obsessed with what people did, not necessarily how they identified. The concept of being gay didn't exist. What mattered was the act, not the label. And because of that, there was a strange sort of space, dangerous, yes, but still a space, where people could explore same-sex relationships without being permanently branded. It was risky, secretive, and coded, but it existed. In Florence, in the 14th century, there were entire underground circles of men who formed hidden communities. These weren't just sexual encounters. Some were relationships that lasted for years. They met in baths, in inns, and sometimes even in public spaces under the guise of friendship. Young apprentices might bond with older mentors. Wealthy merchants had lovers among the servant class. All of it under the shadow of the city's watchful moral eye. And let's not forget the women. Lesbian relationships in medieval times are far harder to trace. Not because they didn't exist, but because men wrote the records, and most of them weren't interested in documenting women's lives unless it involved childbirth or heresy. Still, there are court cases. One, from 15th century France, tells of two women who lived as husband and wife for years, with one disguising herself as a man. When discovered, they were tried, not only for fraud, but for sodomy. The details of their trial are grim, but what stands out is the length they went to in order to be together. Despite knowing the risks, they created a life that defied every rule. Now you might wonder, how did they meet each other? How did they know who to trust? It was all in the codes. In cities, there were spots known only to certain circles, markets, bathhouses, taverns, and alleys where glances meant more than words. In churches, during confession, some priests might listen with understanding, others might report you. It was a constant game of masks, hiding in plain sight. And yet, amid all the danger, there was beauty. In Arabic Spain, Al-Andalus, poetry between men and women of all orientations flourished under Islamic rule. One famous poet, Abu Nuwas, celebrated love between men in his verses. Though the church and mosque alike condemned sodomy, art had a way of slipping past censors. In courtly circles, a knight writing a poem to another knight might be seen as just, noble affection. Only those who knew how to read between the lines would understand its true meaning. Food, daily life, survival, it all continued regardless of identity. In towns, a gay blacksmith might shoe a nobleman's horse during the day, then slip into the back room of a tavern by night. A washerwoman with feelings for another might find moments of closeness during shared chores. These weren't grand romances. They were often quiet, fleeting moments. A touch of a hand, a glance across a pew, a whispered word during festival nights when everyone wore masks and drank too much wine. During festivals like Carnival or May Day, when rules relaxed and people wore disguises, queer folks often found freedom in the chaos. Men dressed as women, women as men. Plays were performed with all-male casts, and sometimes gender was bent for laughter, though not always without danger. Still, for a few days, boundaries blurred. And in the shadows, behind the revelry, some found brief moments to be themselves. Not everyone was hiding, though. Some people got caught. Some were denounced by jealous neighbors, scorned lovers, or angry family members. Some were tortured, imprisoned, exiled, or worse. But the fact that records exist at all, the fact that so many cases were documented, tells us one thing. They were everywhere, and they were not silent. The Middle Ages weren't a monolith. Laws and attitudes shifted wildly depending on place, time, and who held power. In some regions, the church wielded terrifying influence, policing morality with relentless rigor. In others, local customs and practical realities softened the harshest punishments. What mattered most was the constant tension between public condemnation and private reality. For many, survival demanded secrecy, caution, and cunning. Take England, for instance, where the medieval legal system's attitude toward sodomy was shaped by a patchwork of canon law, royal edicts, and local customs. Although explicit laws criminalizing same-sex acts existed, enforcement was inconsistent. Some accused men might face public shaming or exile. Others endured brutal executions. Yet historians know of cases where accusations were dismissed due to lack of evidence or intervention from powerful patrons. This ambiguity created a precarious space, a dangerous tightrope where one misstep could mean ruin. In towns and villages, gossip was as lethal as any law. Accusations could come from envy, jealousy, or simply misunderstandings. Sometimes, neighbors reported a man for unnatural acts after catching a suspicious glance or overhearing a whispered conversation. Other times, the church itself initiated investigations, sending priests and inquisitors to root out sin. But the inquisitors were human, flawed and fallible, and often relied on hearsay, fear, or coercion. Behind closed doors, medieval people sought comfort and companionship in myriad ways. Men might find lovers among soldiers stationed at castles, or among itinerant merchants passing through. City streets, though crowded, offered anonymity under the flickering light of torches. Secret meeting places existed, though their locations were closely guarded. Bathhouses were hubs of both hygiene and desire, and although they sometimes drew suspicion, their popularity endured. Women faced even more perilous circumstances. Without the option to openly express their sexuality, many formed deep emotional bonds disguised as friendships, romantic friendships, by some scholars' term. Sometimes these friendships evolved into relationships, but the risk of discovery was high. Women had fewer legal protections, and any hint of impropriety could lead to harsh punishment. Even so, accounts from letters, court records, and chronicles show that some women navigated these dangers with remarkable bravery. Clothing played a subtle, but important role in medieval identity and disguise. Men who desired other men might adopt softer fabrics or colors to signal their orientation to those who knew the code, while concealing themselves from the wider world. Women who sought to live as men, like the French couple from earlier, often cut their hair short, bound their chests, and learned the trades or skills reserved for men. These acts of rebellion were dangerous, but they allowed glimpses of freedom. Feasts and celebrations were paradoxical moments. The communal joy of eating roasted meats, drinking spiced wine, dancing to lutes and fiddles, and watching jugglers and minstrels sometimes loosened the rigid social order. The carnival atmosphere blurred lines of rank and gender. Queer individuals found brief solace here, hidden behind masks and costumes, their true selves protected by the collective revelry. Food itself was a marker of status and routine. The peasants ate pottage, a thick stew of vegetables and sometimes meat, while nobles feasted on roasted boar, venison, and fresh bread served with honey and cheese. For those hiding love in the shadows, meals were often solitary or shared with a trusted few. The act of breaking bread together was a sacred bond, whether between husband and wife or secret lovers. Yet love and desire in the Middle Ages were not merely acts of defiance. They were expressions of deep humanity. Medieval poetry, songs, and art revealed a tenderness, longing, and heartbreak felt by people whose voices history too often silences. From the troubadours of Provence writing songs to male companions, to the anonymous authors of ballads about forbidden love, the medieval queer experience was rich, complex, and profoundly human. As the medieval period progressed, the rise of centralized monarchies and more codified legal systems meant increased persecution. Witch hunts and moral panics extended to include those accused of unnatural sins. Trials became more public and brutal, aiming not only to punish but to terrify. The stakes grew higher, and the need for secrecy intensified. Despite the risks, queer medieval people created communities, fragile but persistent. Brotherhoods, guilds, and informal networks allowed for mutual support. In some cities, records hint at groups that met for shared prayer, celebration, and companionship, carefully avoiding detection. These networks were lifelines, offering moments of belonging in an otherwise hostile world. This was a world where shadows could conceal both danger and love, where survival demanded courage and cunning, and where the human heart found ways to beat strong despite the odds. The medieval queer experience reminds us that history is never as simple as laws and edicts. It's messy, complicated, and deeply human. One of the most fascinating aspects of medieval queer life lies in the contradictions woven throughout daily existence. While official doctrine loudly condemned same-sex relations as sinful abominations threatening the very order of society, everyday realities painted a more nuanced picture. Social roles were rigid, but human nature, desire, friendship, longing, resisted easy categorization. Take, for example, the peculiar phenomenon of sworn brotherhoods, or blood bonds, found across medieval Europe. These were formalized friendships between men who pledged loyalty to each other, often through elaborate rituals involving shared meals, oath-taking, and sometimes even the mingling of blood. While some historians believe these were purely platonic alliances forged for mutual protection or political gain, others argue that they sometimes conceal deeper emotional or romantic ties. One documented case from 13th century England details two knights who declared themselves blood brothers in a ceremony attended by their peers. Their relationship included sharing a bed during campaigns and exchanging passionate letters filled with words of love and devotion. The language they used, intense and intimate, suggests a bond that went far beyond friendship, yet in public, they maintained the rigid codes of chivalry expected of noblemen. Their story survived because it was unusual, scandalous even, but not unheard of. One documented case from 13th century England details two knights who declared themselves blood brothers in a ceremony attended by their peers. Their relationship included sharing a bed during campaigns and exchanging passionate letters filled with words of love and devotion. The language they used, intense and intimate, suggests a bond that went far beyond friendship, yet in public, they maintained the rigid codes of chivalry expected of noblemen. Their story survived because it was unusual, scandalous even, but not unheard of. The medieval church's view on sexuality complicated these relationships. Clerics often preached fire and brimstone against sins against nature, yet many religious communities wrestled with the realities of human behavior. Monasteries, for instance, were often male-only spaces where monks lived in close quarters, sharing beds and daily routines for years. While some accounts reveal strict enforcement against carnal sins, others show monks expressing affectionate feelings for their brethren through poetry and letters. One famous example is the 12th century monk Peter Abelard, whose letters reveal deep, sometimes tortured emotions towards his student Heloise. Though their story is well known for its tragic romance, scholars have noted the intimate nature of the emotions Abelard expressed toward male friends and colleagues as well. This emotional openness, combined with a strict code of celibacy, created tensions that reverberated through many religious communities. Meanwhile, outside monastic walls, everyday life was a delicate balance between survival and secrecy. In bustling market towns, tradesmen and apprentices worked side by side, sharing meals and living in cramped quarters. Here, social networks formed that allowed discreet relationships to blossom. For some, their sexuality was an open secret among close friends and family, while to others, it was a well-guarded secret protected by coded language and subtle signals. These codes included clothing, gestures, and symbols understood only by those in the know. A particular color, a style of ring, or the way a handkerchief was worn could mark someone as part of a hidden community. Literature and art also played a role. Illuminated manuscripts sometimes contained veiled references or coded images celebrating same-sex love. The question of how medieval queer people navigated the danger is crucial. Fear of denunciation and punishment was real and constant. Some sought refuge in religious institutions, where the power of the church sometimes provided protection, even if it demanded silence and repression. Others fled to cities known for relative tolerance, like certain Italian city-states or the bustling ports of the Mediterranean, where diversity and anonymity offered some safety. Travel itself could be an escape or a new risk. Pilgrimages, popular in medieval times, allowed people to journey far from home. For some queer individuals, pilgrimages were a chance to meet others, to explore new identities away from familiar eyes. Yet the roads were dangerous, and hospitality unpredictable. A stranger's kindness could turn to suspicion in an instant. The role of literature and storytelling was central to medieval queer expression. Troubadours and minstrels often sang of courtly love, sometimes using ambiguous language to mask their true feelings. These songs circulated widely, performed in castles and taverns alike, spreading stories of love, longing, and forbidden desire. Some troubadours were known or suspected to be homosexual, using their art as a way to connect with others and express what society denied. One troubadour, Rainbod de Vaqueras, wrote songs to male companions with such passion that scholars believe he encoded his orientation in metaphor. His verses celebrated beauty, loyalty, and devotion, echoing the secret lives of many in his time. Art and visual culture also reveal hidden stories. Manuscripts and frescoes sometimes included depictions of same-sex affection, masked by allegory or religious symbolism. A pair of saints might be portrayed embracing, or a scene of friendship could carry undertones of something deeper. These images offered comfort and recognition to those who could read their meaning. Food and feasting played their own role in medieval queer social life. Banquets were more than just meals. They were performances of status, culture, and connection. Queer individuals in noble households might attend grand feasts, where the exchange of compliments, poems, and even secret glances added layers of meaning. The table was a stage where alliances were forged and identities negotiated. In contrast, in the everyday taverns and inns, simpler meals, bread, cheese, salted fish, and ale, were shared among those seeking companionship and distraction from the hardships of life. Here, stories were exchanged, friendships formed, and love sometimes quietly blossomed. The Middle Ages were a time when identity was both fluid and fixed, where the boundaries of love and desire were tested in the shadows of fear and hope. The courage it took to live authentically in such a world is almost unimaginable today, yet these stories remind us that queer history is woven into the very fabric of our past, complex, painful, but also rich with humanity. When we imagine the Middle Ages, grand castles, knights in shining armor, and majestic cathedrals often come to mind. Yet, beneath the towering spires and polished armor lived ordinary people, farmers, artisans, merchants, whose lives were shaped by relentless toil, communal ties, and the constant shadow of the church's moral gaze. For queer individuals, this reality was layered with a silent tension, a need to navigate a world that did not recognize their love as legitimate or safe. Consider the rhythms of daily life. Before dawn, peasants rose to tend fields, milking cows, gathering wood, or baking coarse bread in communal ovens. Markets bustled with tradespeople shouting prices and bartering goods, apples, salted pork, wool, and iron tools. Inns offered warm hearths and rough ale, a brief respite from hard labor. In such places, fleeting moments of intimacy could be stolen amid the crowded noise, where a knowing look or discreet touch could pass unnoticed by most, but mean everything to those involved. Festivals punctuated this routine. Saints' days, harvest celebrations, and the rare carnivals when social order relaxed. Masks, costumes, and dancing blurred boundaries, allowing for playful expressions of identity that might otherwise be dangerous. In these moments, a man might don a woman's veil, a woman might dress as a knight, and hidden desires found space beneath layers of fabric and laughter. Yet, danger was never far. The church's influence reached deep into every village and town. Parish priests monitored confessions, sometimes prying for secrets. Heresy and sin were linked in the collective imagination, and those accused of unnatural acts risked excommunication, public humiliation, or worse. Town criers announced punishments. Stocks, whipping posts, or even executions by burning meant to serve as warnings to all. Some queer medieval people sought solace in the city's labyrinthine streets, where anonymity was more attainable. In bustling ports like Venice or Marseille, travelers, sailors, and merchants mingled, creating diverse communities. Stories tell of taverns where coded signs, certain songs, phrases, or symbols signaled safe gathering places for queer patrons. Here, friendships could form, and love might quietly flourish, even as the threat of discovery loomed. Clothing and appearance carried significance beyond fashion. Tailors and cloth merchants knew that colors, cuts, and accessories could communicate identity discreetly. A subtle embroidery on a sleeve or a particular shade of fabric might mark someone as part of a secret world. Hairstyles, too, were telling. Long, soft curls on men, or cropped hair on women living as men, could raise suspicion or provide cover depending on context. Medieval literature offers glimpses into the complexities of love and desire. The Roman de la Rose, a famous 13th century French poem, explores love's joys and pains with layered symbolism, some of which scholars interpret as nods to same-sex affection. In England, Chaucer's works touch on relationships that defy simple categorization, revealing an awareness of diverse human desires even in a society bound by strict norms. Religious life itself was fraught with contradiction. Many men entered the clergy not solely from spiritual calling but also to escape the constraints of traditional marriage, or because other paths were closed to them. Within monasteries, close bonds formed, yet were shadowed by vows of chastity and ongoing scrutiny. Some monks left behind letters and poetry revealing hidden passions and struggles with forbidden feelings, showing the tension between faith and identity. Women, often invisible in historical records, carved out their own spaces for love and companionship. While lesbian relationships were rarely explicitly documented, court cases and personal writings hint at their existence. Some women lived together as female husbands, adopting male roles to live openly with their partners. Others expressed their love through coded language in letters or poetry, navigating a world that erased their desires from official histories. Despite the dangers, queer individuals participated fully in the cultural life of their communities. They were artisans, musicians, scribes, and merchants, roles that sometimes afforded greater mobility and opportunity to connect with others. In cities like Paris and Florence, guilds and fraternities offered social networks that, while primarily professional or religious, occasionally sheltered queer members. Food and drink, central to medieval social life, were also part of this hidden culture. Communal meals symbolized trust and belonging. Sharing bread and wine could mark alliances and friendships as sacred. Queer lovers might meet under the guise of shared meals, their companionship sealed over roasted meats, fresh bread, and the sweetness of honeyed wine. And in the shadows of history, moments of resistance and affirmation flickered. Stories survive of individuals who defied norms with quiet courage, refusing to renounce their love, speaking their truth in poetry, or creating clandestine communities that nurtured belonging. Their lives remind us that even in the darkest times, human connection endures. This intricate dance of love, fear, and survival in the Middle Ages reveals a world far more complex than laws and edicts alone suggest. It challenges us to see history not as distant and static but as alive with the full spectrum of human experience, where identities intersected with culture, power, and desire in endlessly fascinating ways. Among the medieval courts of Europe, where power and politics intertwined with spectacle and ceremony, queer individuals sometimes navigated a paradoxical existence, ostracized in public yet influential behind the scenes. Nobles and courtiers, aware of the dangers of scandal, nonetheless maintained secret relationships and patronized artists, who expressed forbidden desires in veiled forms. This was a world of masks and whispers, where loyalty and love could both empower and destroy. In the glittering courts of France and England, men of status might keep companions or secret lovers. The intricate rules of courtly love, a chivalric tradition that idealized romantic devotion, offered a language that could be adapted for hidden meanings. Poems, songs, and dances masked true affections beneath layers of metaphor. A knight's praise for a nobleman's valor might be a coded declaration of love, understood only by those attuned to its subtleties. Political alliances were also forged through these relationships, complicating the personal and the public. Favoritism based on intimacy could sway decisions, grant privileges, or spark jealousies that rippled through courts. The thin line between friendship, mentorship, and romance was carefully navigated to avoid ruin. The risk was ever present. Scandal could lead to exile or worse. The infamous trial of King James, the first of England's favorites in the early 17th century, slightly post-medieval but reflective of lingering attitudes, demonstrates how accusations of sodomy became tools for political machinations. Though not medieval, the echoes of such dangers had roots deep in earlier centuries. Outside the elite, urban centers provided unique spaces for queer expression. Cities like Venice, known for their mercantile wealth and cultural vibrancy, harbored hidden networks. Legal codes in some Italian city-states were paradoxically more tolerant or lax in enforcement, allowing subcultures to flourish discreetly. Taverns, bathhouses, and private salons became hubs for connection. These spaces were often surveilled and raided, yet their existence testifies to the resilience of queer communities. The popular Carnival Festival, with its role reversals and disguises, offered temporary liberation from strict social norms. Participants wore masks and costumes, blurring identity lines and enabling playful transgression. Queer desires found expression in these moments of chaos and joy. Religious life remained a fraught arena. While church doctrine condemned same-sex acts, individual clergy varied widely in response. Some were zealots enforcing harsh penalties. Others showed compassion, wrestling with their own feelings or protecting congregants. Confessionals could be both instruments of control and places of reluctant understanding. The tension between faith and identity was perhaps most acute in monasteries. Here, men lived celibate lives bound by ritual and study, yet human nature persisted. Some monks engaged in secret relationships or expressed desire through poetry and letters. The legacy of these writings reveals the complexity of medieval spirituality intertwined with forbidden love. Women's experiences, often erased from dominant narratives, were no less rich or challenging. Court records reveal cases of women who lived as men to marry or live openly with female partners. These acts of defiance risked severe punishment, but also embodied a refusal to conform. Women also formed close-knit communities, sharing labor, worship, and companionship. In the realm of art and literature, queer themes persisted beneath the surface. Manuscripts contained illustrations with ambiguous or coded imagery. Songs and poems used allegory and double meanings to speak of love between same-sex partners. These cultural artifacts offered solace and connection to those who recognized their hidden messages. Daily life, with its rituals of work, worship, and socializing, was imbued with these secret currents. Queer individuals balanced public conformity with private truth, finding moments of joy, intimacy, and expression amid a society often hostile to their existence. Food and drink continued to play symbolic roles. Communal feasts could reinforce bonds, while shared meals between lovers became acts of resistance and affirmation. The act of breaking bread together carried weight far beyond sustenance. The medieval queer experience, woven through layers of secrecy, risk, artistry, and resilience, challenges modern assumptions about identity and history. It reveals a past vibrant with complexity, where love and desire found ways to persist against daunting odds. In the winding alleyways of medieval cities, where the scent of baked bread mingled with the sharp tang of tanneries, and the chatter of merchants hawking their wares, queer lives unfolded in a delicate dance of concealment and courage. The streets, lit by flickering lanterns and guarded by watchmen wary of troublemakers, bore silent witness to whispered meetings, stolen touches, and coded glances exchanged under the shadows of towering stone walls. Everyday survival demanded vigilance. The threat of exposure was real and relentless. Neighbors, fueled by suspicion or malice, might betray secrets for personal gain or out of zeal. The social fabric was tight-knit, and rumors spread swiftly through marketplaces, taverns, and church gatherings. Yet, within this surveillance society, queer individuals carved out hidden sanctuaries, places where trust could be fostered and love allowed to breathe. Bathhouses, those centers of hygiene and socializing, held a peculiar duality. While serving as venues for cleansing and relaxation, they also became discreet meeting places for same-sex desire. The warm steam, the murmur of water, and the close quarters created intimacy beyond the surface. Yet, the risk was ever present. Authorities sometimes raided these establishments, punishing those caught in compromising acts, making every visit a perilous venture into the unknown. The language of gestures and symbols was essential. A handkerchief folded in a particular way, a ring worn on an unconventional finger, or a certain phrase uttered in passing could signal belonging to a hidden community. These signs allowed queer people to identify one another discreetly, forging connections in a society that demanded silence. Food, too, became entwined with secret lives. In crowded taverns, over hearty stews and mugs of ale, alliances were formed and stories shared. The act of sharing a meal was a powerful expression of trust. For lovers, arranging such moments required subtlety and planning, lest suspicion arise. Yet, these occasions offered warmth, not just of sustenance, but of companionship and affirmation. Women faced distinct challenges. Limited by societal constraints and erased from official histories, their expressions of love were often veiled in friendship or cloaked in roles reserved for men. Some women disguised themselves as men to live openly with their partners, learning trades and adopting mannerisms to sustain their identities. Their courage echoes faintly through court documents and personal letters, fragments of lives lived boldly despite harsh consequences. The church's omnipresent influence permeated daily life. Confession was both a source of solace and a tool of control. Queer individuals often grappled with guilt imposed by doctrine, seeking forgiveness while concealing their true selves. Some priests offered compassion, others condemnation, making the confessional a place of both refuge and terror. Art and literature whispered tales of forbidden love. Manuscripts illuminated with delicate brushwork sometimes contained images that, to the untrained eye, appeared innocent, but for those attuned, revealed coded affirmations of same-sex affection. Troubadour songs and poetic verses carried double meanings, allowing desires to be expressed without words explicitly spoken. Festivals and holy days disrupted the rigid order, offering moments of freedom. Carnival, with its masks and role reversals, allowed participants to challenge norms, experiment with identity, and find brief liberation. Queer individuals seized these moments to express hidden facets of themselves, dancing and laughing beneath the protective veil of festivity. Despite peril, these lives were rich with complexity. Love mingled with fear, hope with secrecy, resistance with adaptation. The medieval queer experience reminds us that human desire cannot be fully suppressed, even in the most constrained circumstances. It is a testament to resilience, creativity, and the enduring quest for connection in a world determined to deny it. Across the medieval landscape, monasteries stood as imposing symbols of faith and discipline, their thick stone walls sheltering men who had renounced worldly life. Yet, within these cloisters, human desires whispered quietly behind locked doors. The strict vows of celibacy, while sacred, often clashed with the natural impulses of those sworn to them. Letters and poems from these walls reveal bonds of intense emotional depth, sometimes crossing the boundaries into what modern readers might interpret as romantic or sexual affection. The monastic scriptoria, where monks painstakingly copied manuscripts by candlelight, became places not only of spiritual devotion, but also of secret longing. Illuminated letters were sometimes adorned with marginalia, small, hidden drawings that hint at the complexities beneath the pious exterior. Scholars today study these subtle clues, trying to piece together the untold stories of those who lived lives of both devotion and hidden desire. Not all monasteries were alike. Some orders were known for stricter enforcement of chastity, while others tolerated greater emotional closeness. The Benedictines, Cistercians, and Augustinians each had their own customs, yet in every house, the tension between duty and desire simmered. Confessors, too, varied, some harsh and unyielding, others compassionate and discreet. The Church's official stance on homosexuality was clear and unforgiving, condemning it as sodomy and labeling it among the gravest sins. Penalties ranged from penance to exile, imprisonment, or death. Still, enforcement depended on local authorities and often reflected political or social motives rather than consistent legal application. Many cases never reached the public eye, quietly settled or suppressed. Women's experiences in religious life were equally complex. Nunneries offered an alternative to marriage, but vows of chastity and obedience did not erase human need for connection. Letters and poems exchanged between nuns show profound spiritual and emotional ties, sometimes blurring the lines between friendship and love. The famous Moralium Dogma Philosophorum discusses such relationships, though always condemning sexual activity outside marriage. Outside the cloisters, townsfolk and nobility contended with the intersection of religion, law, and social expectations. Queer individuals had to perform public piety to maintain status and avoid suspicion. Rituals like attending Mass, confessing sins, and participating in community events were both acts of faith and necessary masks. The delicate balance between survival and authenticity required constant negotiation. In the world of medieval commerce and craft, guilds structured social and economic life. These organizations regulated trades, enforced standards, and provided mutual aid. Some guilds included rules about behavior and morality, which could impact members' private lives. Yet guild halls also served as social centers where bonds formed, friendships deepened, and, occasionally, secret loves blossomed. Apprentices often lived and worked closely with masters, creating opportunities for intimacy amid daily routines. Travel was another crucial aspect. Pilgrimages, undertaken to holy sites like Santiago de Compostela or Canterbury, offered spiritual purpose and, for some, a chance to escape restrictive environments. On these journeys, people from diverse backgrounds met, sharing stories and forming bonds. For queer pilgrims, the road could mean both freedom and danger, anonymity and exposure. Inns along the way were places of rest, but also risk, where trust had to be earned quickly and carefully. The arts, music, poetry, and theater offered veiled outlets for queer expression. Traveling minstrels and troubadours crafted songs rich with allegory and double meanings, their performances layered with nuances understood only by insiders. These cultural forms created a shared language, allowing forbidden desires to be expressed indirectly yet powerfully. Despite the harsh realities, moments of joy and affection punctuated lives. Secret meetings in gardens or secluded groves, exchanged tokens like rings or embroidered handkerchiefs, and whispered promises beneath moonlit skies sustained hope. These acts, though small, were radical affirmations of love in a world intent on erasure. Ultimately, the medieval queer experience was not a singular story, but a mosaic of countless individual lives, some marked by tragedy, others by quiet resilience. Their histories, fragmented and often hidden, reveal a humanity that transcends centuries, reminding us that love in all its forms has always been part of the human story. as daylight spilled over the tiled roofs and narrow alleys of medieval towns. The rhythm of daily life pulsed with a mixture of routine and unpredictability. For queer individuals, each day presented a complex web of choices: when to conceal, when to reveal, when to seek companionship, and when to retreat into solitude. Their existence was a careful balancing act on a knife's edge, where a single glance could spark connection or suspicion. Public spaces were arenas of performance, where appearances mattered immensely. Markets overflowed with vibrant colors and sounds, the clamor of merchants, the scent of freshly baked bread mingling with pungent herbs and animals. Here, tradesmen wore aprons stained with oil or flour, and artisans displayed finely crafted wares, leather goods, textiles, metalwork. Among these everyday interactions, subtle signals passed unnoticed by most but charged with meaning to those who understood. Taverns and inns, hubs of social life, offered fleeting moments of respite from the harshness outside. Thick wooden tables groaned under the weight of coarse bread, salted meats, and cups of ale or spiced wine. Here, conversations wove between gossip, politics, and poetry. Queer patrons found places at the edges of these gatherings, where the din shielded secret talks and furtive glances. The world outside church doors was one of strict moral codes, but inside, human complexity persisted. Confessionals were paradoxical spaces where individuals grappled with faith, guilt, and desire. The confessor's role oscillated between spiritual guide and moral judge. Some were harsh, demanding public penance or even denunciation. Others offered discreet counsel, understanding the burdens borne by those they served. Women, largely confined to domestic spheres, forged connections through shared labor and worship. In the village hearth's glow or the quiet corners of churches, whispered confidences built bonds of trust. Some women crossed social boundaries by dressing as men, adopting masculine roles to live openly with female partners. Their courage challenged norms and risked severe consequences, yet their stories endured in court records and oral histories. Clothing and appearance served as coded language. A carefully folded handkerchief, a brooch pinned at a particular angle, or the choice of a subtle color could communicate identity to those attuned. Tailors and seamstresses, skilled in their crafts, sometimes created garments that allowed wearers to express facets of themselves safely beneath layers of fabric and expectation. Literature, too, played a vital role. Manuscripts containing poetry, allegory, and moral tales circulated among literate elites. Troubadours and minstrels performed works filled with layered meanings, their songs sung in great halls and taverns alike. Through metaphor and ambiguity, these artists gave voice to desires that dared not speak their names. Feasts and festivals punctuated the year, breaking the monotony of toil and discipline. On days like Carnival or May Day, social hierarchies blurred. Masks and costumes offered cover for exploration of identity and desire. Queer individuals seized these fleeting freedoms, dancing, laughing, and loving beneath the cover of revelry. Food itself was steeped in symbolism. Sharing bread and wine echoed sacred rituals of communion, but also forged earthly bonds. Queer lovers, meeting in secret, shared meals that nourished both body and spirit. The act of eating together was a declaration of trust and belonging in a world that often denied them. Through fear and hope, repression and resistance, the medieval queer experience was a testament to human resilience. It challenges us to look beyond black and white narratives of history, revealing instead a tapestry woven with courage, love, and complexity. Beneath the towering cathedrals, where stained glass windows cast kaleidoscopic light on ancient stone floors, the medieval world thrummed with contradictions. These grand structures, symbols of divine authority and order, also sheltered secrets, hidden stories of those whose desires diverged from the official path. Within their shadowed aisles and quiet chapels, queer lives unfolded in whispered prayers and stolen moments. Religious festivals brought both comfort and danger. The solemn rhythms of Lent, Easter, and Christmas punctuated the year, drawing communities together in worship. Yet, during these sacred times, individuals grappled privately with their identities, often concealing love beneath layers of ritual and obligation. The dichotomy between public piety and private passion was a constant struggle. In urban centers, guilds regulated the economic and social life of craftsmen and merchants. These guilds, while primarily focused on trade and apprenticeship, also fostered social networks that occasionally sheltered queer members. Apprentices lived in close quarters with masters, sharing meals, beds, and daily routines, creating opportunities for intimacy beneath the surface of commerce. The legal system, a patchwork of royal edicts, canon law, and local customs, cast a long shadow over queer lives. Punishments for unnatural acts ranged from fines and public humiliation to imprisonment and execution. Yet, enforcement was often inconsistent, influenced by politics, personal vendettas, and community attitudes. Some accused individuals escaped severe consequences, while others faced tragic ends. Letters, diaries, and court records offer glimpses into these lives. The passionate correspondence between men and women reveals emotions as complex and deep as any in history. These documents, often hidden or censored, illuminate the humanity behind the labels and laws, reminding us that love in all its forms transcends time. In rural villages, isolation intensified challenges. Gossip could ruin reputations overnight, and local authorities often acted swiftly to punish perceived transgressions. Yet, even here, queer individuals found ways to connect, through shared labor, communal worship, and discreet gatherings in forests or by rivers under the cover of night. The arts continued to provide outlets for expression. Troubadours composed songs filled with layered meanings, while illuminated manuscripts included imagery that hinted at alternative loves. Theater, performed during festivals, sometimes explored themes of identity and desire through allegory and humor. Food, a central element of medieval life, carried symbolic weight. The sharing of meals reinforced social bonds, and for queer lovers, arranging private dinners was an act of resistance and affirmation. The tastes of roasted meats, fresh bread, honeyed wine, and spiced stews were intertwined with the intimacy of companionship. Through all these facets, the medieval queer experience emerges as one of resilience, adaptation, and hidden beauty. It challenges simplistic narratives, inviting us to see history as a rich tapestry of human lives, complex, courageous, and enduring. In the dimly lit chambers of medieval castles, where stone walls echoed with whispers of intrigue and power, the private lives of nobles unfolded behind heavy tapestries and locked doors. While courtly rituals demanded public adherence to strict codes of behavior, the reality was far more complex. Desire and affection often existed in hidden corners, shaping alliances and rivalries alike. Courtiers learned to speak in coded language. A glance across a crowded hall, a carefully placed word in a poem, or the choice of a gift could carry layered meanings understood only by those attuned. Such subtle communication allowed queer relationships to thrive under the watchful eyes of gossiping courtiers and vigilant monarchs. Political fortunes could hinge on these secret liaisons. Favorites of kings or queens, whether male or female, wielded influence far beyond their official titles. Their relationships, shrouded in discretion, could inspire envy, plots, and sometimes downfall. The line between power and peril was razor-thin. Outside the nobility, the bustling towns and cities were melting pots of culture and commerce, where diversity, though limited, found space. Markets overflowed with goods from distant lands, spices, silks, and exotic fruits. Here, people of various backgrounds mingled, creating opportunities for connection beyond rigid social boundaries. Guilds and fraternities offered more than economic support. They created social networks that occasionally provided refuge for queer members. Apprenticeships meant close daily contact, and shared living quarters fostered bonds that could blossom into affection or love. Religious life, both a source of comfort and constraint, shaped identities in profound ways. Pilgrimages to holy sites attracted thousands seeking spiritual renewal, but also, for some, an escape from surveillance and judgment. On the road, anonymity and camaraderie offered fleeting freedoms, even as dangers lurked. Festivals and carnivals, with their masks and misrule, temporarily upended social order. These celebrations allowed queer individuals to express hidden facets of themselves, to dance and laugh beneath the protective veil of chaos. The liberation was brief but vital, a balm against the rigid structures of everyday life. The arts flourished as vessels of coded expression. Troubadours and minstrels crafted songs and stories that veiled desires in metaphor. Illuminated manuscripts and frescoes contained images that, while outwardly religious or allegorical, whispered of alternative loves to those who looked closely. In everyday life, the sharing of food and drink carried deep meaning. Queer lovers found in shared meals moments of connection and affirmation, where the simple act of breaking bread transcended survival to become a declaration of trust and belonging. Throughout the medieval period, the interplay of fear, hope, repression, and resistance defined the queer experience. It was a story of hidden lives and enduring love, woven into the fabric of history with threads both fragile and strong. Understanding this past enriches our appreciation of humanity's complexity and the timeless nature of desire. In the quiet solitude of medieval libraries, where dusty tomes rested beneath flickering candlelight, knowledge was both preserved and controlled. Manuscripts, painstakingly copied by scribes, included not only sacred texts but also poetry, philosophy, and histories, some containing veiled references to love beyond societal norms. These words, hidden between lines or illustrated in marginalia, offered rare glimpses into queer lives otherwise lost to time. The monastic scribes who created these works were often themselves part of the complex web of human emotion and desire. Their annotations and drawings sometimes reveal personal reflections, coded expressions of affection, or subtle defiance against rigid orthodoxy. The act of copying texts became an act of both preservation and quiet rebellion. Outside the walls of sanctuaries, urban guilds organized the labor and social lives of artisans, merchants, and laborers. These groups regulated training, trade secrets, and standards, but they also fostered social bonds. Apprenticeships required living with masters, creating intimate environments where friendships, mentorships, and sometimes love could flourish, despite the dangers of exposure. Taverns remained central to social life. Amid the clatter of mugs and hum of conversations, people from all walks gathered to share news, stories, and sometimes forbidden desires. These spaces, though often rough and noisy, offered moments of connection and escape from the strictures of daily life. Religious doctrine condemned same-sex relations, yet the complexities of human nature found expression even within these confines. Some clergy wrestled with their desires privately, while others offered unexpected kindness to those burdened by guilt. Confessionals could be places of terror or solace, depending on the confessor's temperament. Women's experiences remained largely hidden, but court records and personal writings hint at deep bonds and sometimes romantic love. Some women crossed gender boundaries, adopting male dress and roles to live authentically with their partners. These acts were perilous, but speak to the resilience and determination of those who refuse to be erased. Travelers on pilgrimage routes encountered diverse communities, where anonymity allowed for connections unlikely at home. Inns and hostels provided rest, but also risked exposure. The road was a space of freedom and fear, where friendships were forged and secrets kept. Artistic expression thrived in this tension. Troubadours and poets wove allegory and metaphor to express desire, while visual artists included coded images in manuscripts and frescoes. These cultural artifacts provided recognition and hope to those marginalized by mainstream narratives. The sharing of food continued as a powerful symbol. Queer individuals found in communal meals moments of affirmation and trust. Bread broken together, wine poured in shared cups, became acts of resistance against isolation and repression. In the end, the medieval queer experience is a testament to human complexity. It reveals lives lived with courage and creativity, navigating fear and hope in a world that often sought to silence them. Their stories, though fragmented, enrich our understanding of history's diverse tapestry. In the grand halls where knights gathered to celebrate victories or plot future campaigns, the interplay of loyalty, desire, and danger wove a delicate tapestry. Military life, with its close quarters and shared hardships, created bonds that sometimes blossomed into deep affection or love, despite the ever-present threat of censure and punishment. The campfire's glow illuminated whispered conversations and secret promises that history rarely records. Soldiers marched side by side, sharing rations of coarse bread, salted meat, and water, their bodies tired but spirits entwined. The camaraderie forged on the battlefield often transcended simple friendship. Letters smuggled between comrades, rich with coded language and tender expressions, hint at the emotional lives behind the armor. The brutal realities of war heightened the stakes. Discipline was harsh, and accusations of unnatural acts could lead to severe punishment, from flogging to execution. Yet the necessity of trust and reliance among soldiers sometimes fostered protective bonds, where loyalty shielded the vulnerable and whispered warnings guarded secrets. Outside the military sphere, the world of trade and travel offered both freedom and peril. Merchants journeyed along winding routes, carrying goods and stories between cities and kingdoms. These itinerant lives enabled encounters across cultures, where queer individuals could find pockets of acceptance or at least anonymity amid diverse populations. Market towns bustled with activity, stalls laden with spices, textiles, and exotic wares from far-off lands. Here, chance meetings in crowded streets or quiet corners could spark connections otherwise impossible in rigid home communities. The urban environment, with its noise and crowds, provided cover for coded communication and clandestine meetings. Religious festivals, celebrated with fervor and pageantry, were also moments of social complexity. Pilgrimages brought together people from all walks of life, creating transient communities bound by faith, but also by shared experience and, occasionally, shared secrets. In these gatherings, the boundaries between the sacred and the profane blurred, offering fleeting freedoms. Women, often relegated to the margins of recorded history, navigated their own worlds of affection and defiance. Some disguised themselves as men to escape societal constraints, adopting trades and forming relationships with women openly. These acts of courage challenged norms and risked harsh reprisals, yet their persistence speaks to a powerful human will. Art and literature continued to be vital vessels of queer expression. Songs, poems, and plays employed allegory and coded language, creating a shared lexicon of desire and identity. Illuminated manuscripts contained images that, beneath religious themes, celebrated alternative loves with subtlety and grace. The communal act of sharing food remained a profound symbol. Queer individuals found in these moments a rare affirmation of belonging and trust. Meals were carefully arranged occasions where love could be nurtured, even in the shadows of suspicion and danger. Ultimately, the medieval queer experience is a story of resilience, of finding light in darkness, of forging connection amid repression, and of living authentically in a world that often denied their existence. Their legacy enriches our understanding of humanity's enduring quest for love and acceptance. In the tapestry of medieval society, the intersections of class, gender, and sexuality created a complex mosaic that shaped individual lives in profound ways. For queer people, social status could offer both protection and peril. Nobles might leverage their power to shield relationships that others could only dream of, while common folk faced harsher scrutiny and fewer resources to hide or defend themselves. In castles, where political intrigue was constant and trust was a scarce commodity, secret lovers moved carefully among the courtiers and servants. The intricacies of court etiquette masked deeper emotions, touches disguised as formal greetings, whispered words veiled in poetry, and gifts passed under the table. A noble's favor could protect a lover from accusations, but jealousy and betrayal lurked in every shadow. For peasants and artisans, daily life was shaped by the demands of labor and survival. Yet, even amid the endless toil, plowing fields, weaving cloth, baking bread, their hearts sought connection. Market days brought rare chances for socializing, where furtive glances and coded language enabled the formation of discreet bonds. Friendships might blossom into love, nurtured in secret corners of village squares or hidden among the stacks of grain. The church's influence pervaded all aspects of life, dictating moral codes and enforcing laws that criminalized same-sex desire. Penances for sins against nature were severe in public, designed to shame and deter. Yet enforcement varied widely by region and era, often influenced by local politics and the personal attitudes of clerics. In some places, leniency allowed queer individuals to live with relative safety. In others, fear and persecution ruled. Religious rituals provided both comfort and conflict. Attending Mass, participating in confession, and observing holy days were essential to community belonging. For queer people, these acts often involved a painful duality, faith and identity pulling in opposite directions. Confessionals could be sources of relief or fear, depending on the confessor's approach. Women's experiences, frequently erased from official records, emerged through fragments, trial documents, letters, and poems. Some women lived as men, taking on male names and professions to escape restrictive gender roles, and live openly with female partners. These acts were risky but speak to the profound desire for autonomy and love. Urban centers, with their bustling streets and diverse populations, offered spaces for relative anonymity. Taverns, guild halls, and festivals became meeting points where queer people found community and expression. The carnival season, with its masks and revelry, temporarily upended social hierarchies, allowing hidden desires to surface in dance and song. Artistic expression thrived amid constraint. Minstrels and poets used allegory and double entendre to explore themes of love and longing. Illuminated manuscripts contained hidden symbols that spoke to those who looked closely. These cultural artifacts offered connection and hope, affirming that queer lives were part of the broader human story. Food and communal meals continued to symbolize trust and belonging. Shared dinners between lovers were acts of courage and affirmation. The taste of roasted meats, fresh bread, and spiced wine mingled with whispered promises and secret smiles, creating moments of joy in a world often marked by fear. The medieval queer experience, with all its complexities, challenges modern preconceptions. It reveals a past rich with courage, creativity, and resilience, a testament to the enduring human spirit's search for love and acceptance in every age. Amid the twisting alleys and cobblestone streets of medieval towns, the pulse of daily life was relentless. Merchants hawked their goods, children played beneath watchful eyes, and artisans crafted their wares with practiced hands. Yet beneath this bustling surface, queer lives thrived in subtle and often hidden ways, weaving a complex web of secrecy, trust, and daring. Public spaces were both arenas of social engagement and potential danger. Town squares hosted fairs and markets where people from distant villages converged, bringing news, goods, and gossip. Here, a fleeting touch or a shared glance could carry profound meaning, a whispered acknowledgement amid the crowd. The language of gestures and symbols became a vital code, enabling queer individuals to find each other in a world demanding silence. In the warmth of taverns, where firelight danced on wooden beams and ale flowed freely, stories and songs filled the air. Minstrels entertained with tales of chivalry and romance, their verses often laced with double meanings that only the initiated could fully grasp. Queer patrons found sanctuary in these lively gatherings, forming communities that defied the era's rigid norms. Women, largely confined to domestic spheres, cultivated bonds through shared labor and faith. In kitchens filled with the scent of baking bread and simmering stews, friendships blossomed into deeper connections. Some women defied convention by dressing as men, taking on trades and roles usually reserved for males, thereby forging paths to live authentically with female partners despite the risks. The church's omnipresent influence shaped not only laws, but also social attitudes. Confessions, sermons, and communal rituals reinforced doctrines condemning same-sex love, yet the complexity of individual faith experiences allowed for moments of compassion and understanding. Clergy varied widely, from zealous enforcers of orthodoxy to empathetic counselors wrestling with their own humanity. Festivals like Carnival and May Day punctuated the calendar with vibrant displays of color, music, and revelry. These occasions temporarily upended social hierarchies, allowing for playful role reversals and masked freedoms. Queer individuals seized these fleeting moments to express hidden aspects of themselves, dancing and laughing beneath the protective cloak of celebration. The act of sharing food remained deeply symbolic. Breaking bread and pouring wine were gestures of trust and acceptance. Queer lovers arranged secret dinners, where the tastes of roasted meats, fresh fruits, and spiced wines mingled with whispered promises and tender glances, creating sanctuaries of intimacy amid a world often hostile to their existence. Literature and art served as quiet refuges. Illuminated manuscripts, poems, and songs wove allegories of love that transcended gender, allowing queer desires to be voiced in coded language. These cultural treasures preserved expressions of identity that mainstream history sought to erase. Through all these layers, the medieval queer experience emerges as one of resilience, creativity, and enduring hope. It challenges us to look beyond black and white narratives and appreciate the rich tapestry of human life, where love, in all its forms, persisted even in the darkest of times. Within the cloistered gardens and hidden chambers of medieval monasteries and convents, quiet stories of love and longing unfolded far from the public eye. The walls, thick with centuries of stone and ivy, sheltered emotions that challenged the strict vows of chastity and obedience. Monks and nuns, bound by religious duty, grappled with desires that neither scripture nor community could fully suppress. Manuscripts produced in these sacred spaces reveal more than just theological treatises. Marginalia, small illustrations and notes in the margins, sometimes depict figures in intimate embraces or include coded symbols understood by the initiated. These hidden artworks offer glimpses into the humanity behind the habit and veil, revealing a complex interplay between spirituality and passion. The ritual of confession, a cornerstone of medieval religious life, was fraught with tension for queer individuals. The confessor's role oscillated between spiritual guide and moral enforcer, offering both the possibility of forgiveness and the threat of condemnation. Some priests exhibited compassion, quietly shielding those burdened by forbidden love, while others zealously sought out transgressors to punish. Outside the cloister walls, medieval cities buzzed with life and contradictions. Guilds organized tradespeople into tight-knit communities, regulating not only craft standards, but also social conduct. Apprenticeships meant close daily contact and shared living spaces, providing opportunities for bonds to form beyond mere friendship. Within these networks, queer individuals often found pockets of acceptance, or at least mutual understanding. Markets overflowed with vibrant goods, spices from the East, rich fabrics dyed in vivid hues, hand-forged tools, each stall a crossroads of culture and commerce. Among the hustle, coded glances and subtle signs facilitated secret communication. The art of discretion was mastered, allowing queer lovers to meet under the guise of business or friendship. Religious festivals punctuated the calendar with communal celebrations, often involving feasts, music, and dance. Carnival and similar festivities temporarily loosened the rigid social order, permitting role reversals and masked freedoms. For queer individuals, these moments offered rare chances to express identity and affection openly, if only briefly. The sharing of food remained a potent symbol of connection. Secret meals between lovers became acts of resistance and affirmation. The taste of roasted game, freshly baked bread, and spiced wine intertwined with whispered promises and tender touches, creating sanctuaries of intimacy within a world marked by suspicion. Art and literature served as vital vessels for queer expression. Troubadours composed songs rich with double meanings, while illuminated manuscripts preserved images that hinted at alternative loves. These cultural artifacts, carefully hidden or coded, offered recognition and hope to those living on society's margins. The medieval queer experience, with all its complexities and contradictions, reveals a history of courage, creativity, and resilience. It challenges us to recognize the enduring humanity behind laws and prejudices, reminding us that love, in all its forms, has always been an integral part of the human story. In the shadowy corners of medieval cities, where flickering torches barely illuminated narrow streets, slick with rain and refuse, queer individuals navigated a labyrinth of danger and desire. These urban landscapes, teeming with life and unpredictability, offered both anonymity and risk. The crowded markets, bustling workshops, and smoky taverns formed a backdrop against which hidden lives played out in whispered conversations and secret rendezvous. For the common folk, daily survival took precedence, yet beneath the surface, human needs and emotions persisted. Laborers in blacksmith shops, weavers in cramped guild halls, and fishmongers at the docks all carried stories of longing and love, often concealed beneath layers of fear. The tightly knit communities meant gossip traveled fast, and discretion was paramount. Public events, from religious processions to fairs, drew crowds where coded signs and subtle gestures passed unnoticed by outsiders, but signaled belonging to those in the know. A particular way of folding a cloak, the choice of a colored scarf, or a phrase slipped into conversation could identify someone as part of a hidden network. Taverns, with their roaring fires and flowing ale, were both sanctuaries and perilous grounds. Here, stories mixed with song, and occasional acts of defiance challenged societal norms. Queer patrons found camaraderie in these noisy spaces, sharing news, jokes, and hopes amidst the clatter of mugs and laughter. Women, often constrained by social and legal restrictions, forged bonds of solidarity and affection through shared work and worship. Some crossed gender boundaries, adopting male attire and roles to claim agency and live openly with female partners. These acts of courage were met with both fear and fascination, documented in court records that hint at the complexity of gender and sexuality in medieval life. The omnipresent influence of the Church permeated every aspect of existence. Religious doctrine condemned same-sex desire harshly, yet lived experience was far more nuanced. Some clergy exhibited compassion, understanding the burdens of confession and secrecy, while others enforced orthodoxy with ruthless zeal. confessionals could be places of both solace and terror. Artistic expression thrived in this tense environment. Troubadours and poets crafted verses layered with metaphor and allegory, allowing forbidden desires to be voiced indirectly. Illuminated manuscripts and frescoes contained subtle imagery that spoke to queer viewers in coded language. Food and communal meals remained powerful symbols of connection and trust. For queer lovers, arranging private dinners was an act of courage and affirmation. The sharing of bread, meat, and wine became a ritual of intimacy, a momentary escape from a world that often denied their existence. Through fear and hope, repression and resilience, the medieval queer experience unfolds as a story of enduring humanity. It challenges us to see beyond simplistic judgments, embracing the rich and complex tapestry of lives lived with love and courage in even the harshest of times. Within the echoing chambers of royal courts, where the interplay of power and desire often determine the fate of kingdoms, queer lives unfolded with a delicate balance of secrecy and influence. Monarchs and nobles, bound by duty and public scrutiny, frequently engaged in relationships that defied the era's rigid moral codes, weaving love and politics into a complex tapestry. Courtiers moved with careful precision, their every word and gesture laden with meaning. A hand lightly resting on a shoulder during a grand feast, a whispered compliment exchanged in shadowed corridors. These were the language of secret alliances and hidden passions. Favoritism granted privileges, but also bred envy and danger. Scandals, when exposed, could topple reigns and ruin reputations. Beyond the gilded halls, cities thrummed with vibrant energy. Markets overflowed with exotic spices, rich fabrics, and artisan crafts, attracting travelers from distant lands. In these bustling hubs, diversity of thought and identity found subtle expression, though always under the vigilant gaze of authorities and church officials. Guilds maintained strict codes, but within their ranks, bonds formed through shared labor and mutual reliance. Apprentices lived closely with masters, their daily routines creating spaces where affection might bloom discreetly. The proximity of bodies and the necessity of trust fostered connections that transcended simple companionship. Religious institutions cast long shadows over these lives. The Church's condemnation of same-sex love was unwavering, yet individuals within its ranks exhibited a range of responses, from harsh persecution to quiet empathy. The confessional became a site of complex negotiation between guilt, forgiveness, and survival. Women's narratives, often hidden in the margins, reveal acts of defiance and resilience. Some adopted male identities to pursue love and independence, navigating a perilous path that challenged societal norms. Their stories, though fragmentary, speak to the enduring human desire for authenticity and connection. Festivals and holy days punctuated the year, offering moments when societal rules relaxed. Masks, costumes, and role reversals provided cover for expressions of identity and desire that otherwise remained suppressed. These transient freedoms allowed queer individuals brief reprieves and joyful celebration. Art and literature served as vital vessels for coded communication. Troubadours composed layered songs, and illuminated manuscripts bore images that spoke in symbolism understood only by insiders. These creative expressions preserved a hidden heritage of love and longing. The act of sharing food retained deep significance. Secret dinners, where roasted meats and spiced wines accompanied whispered confessions, became sanctuaries of intimacy and resistance. In a world fraught with danger, these moments affirmed the enduring power of love. The medieval queer experience, fraught with peril yet rich with courage, creativity, and hope, invites us to reconsider history's narratives. It reveals a past alive with complexity, where love in all its forms persisted against daunting odds. Along the twisting waterways and bustling ports of medieval Europe, where ships arrived bearing goods and news from distant shores. Queer lives found fleeting moments of freedom amid the ebb and flow of commerce. The docks teemed with sailors, merchants, and travelers, men and women drawn by the promise of opportunity, but also faced with uncertainty and hardship. Here, among crates of spices and barrels of wine, relationships crossed boundaries of class and culture. Sailors, spending long months at sea, forged bonds of intense camaraderie, sometimes deepening into affection or love. The confined quarters of ships created intimate environments where trust was essential, and secrets were shared beneath the creaking masts and starry skies. Letters written during voyages, some carefully coded, hit at relationships that defied social norms once ashore. Port towns, with their transient populations and vibrant mix of cultures, offered spaces where queer individuals could blend into the crowd. Inns and taverns echoed with music and laughter, hosting gatherings where stories and desires intertwined. Yet, the danger of exposure was ever present. Local laws and church authorities often targeted those suspected of unnatural acts with harsh punishments. Markets overflowed with exotic goods, silks from the East, fragrant spices, and delicate glassware, symbols of the wider world's interconnectedness. These vibrant centers of trade also became hubs for exchanging information and forming networks, some of which fostered clandestine connections among queer people. Religious influence loomed large in port cities, where churches stood sentinel over daily life. The tension between faith and identity was palpable. Pilgrimages often began or ended at these coastal towns, where travelers sought spiritual renewal and, for some, a chance to escape the confines of their past lives. Women in these bustling environments navigated complex social roles. Some disguised themselves as men to work in trades or travel with female companions, challenging rigid gender norms and risking severe penalties. Their courage and resilience offer glimpses into a world where identity was both a personal truth and a social battleground. Art and literature continue to serve as veiled expressions of queer experience. Songs sung by minstrels, poems exchanged among patrons, and illuminated texts contained layers of meaning accessible only to those attuned. These cultural artifacts preserve voices that history often sought to silence. Sharing food and drink remained acts of communion and rebellion. Secret suppers in quiet tavern rooms, where roasted meats, fresh bread, and spiced wine were savored alongside whispered declarations of love, became lifelines in a hostile world. The medieval queer experience in these port cities, marked by transience and diversity, reflects broader themes of survival and connection. It reveals how, even amid uncertainty and danger, human desire found ways to endure and flourish. Amid the vast, sprawling farmlands that dotted medieval Europe, the rhythms of sowing and harvest dictated the lives of peasants, yet beneath this cyclical toil, stories of queer existence quietly unfolded. In the quiet hours between dawn and dusk, when the fields lay bathed in golden light, and the scent of earth and growing grain filled the air, human hearts beat with longing and love, even in places where suspicion ran deep. Village life was governed by tradition and communal scrutiny. Neighbors watched one another's comings and goings, gossip spreading swiftly like wildfire. Yet, even in this tight-knit environment, queer individuals carved out spaces of connection. Shared labor, plowing, harvesting, tending animals, offered moments of closeness where affection might quietly grow, shielded by the busyness of work. The seasonal festivals celebrated cycles of life, death, and rebirth. At harvest feasts and May Day dances, the strictures of everyday life loosened, and revelry brought communities together in vibrant displays of music, dance, and feasting. For queer people, these times offered rare glimpses of freedom, where laughter and touch could be exchanged beneath the open sky without immediate fear of reprisal. Religion permeated village existence, yet the faith of individuals often carried complexities unseen by official doctrine. Confessions were moments fraught with tension, balancing fear of punishment with the desire for spiritual solace. Priests varied, from harsh enforcers to gentle listeners, shaping the experience of those wrestling with forbidden desires. Women in rural communities developed deep bonds, forged through shared hardships and joys. Some crossed societal lines by adopting masculine dress or roles, seeking freedom to love and live authentically with female partners. These acts of defiance were dangerous but spoke to the enduring human will to claim identity and connection. Storytelling, song, and local folklore carried coded messages. Ballads sung at hearths, tales told under starlit skies, and whispered legends preserved themes of love that transcended societal boundaries. These oral traditions passed down layers of queer experience hidden beneath layers of myth and allegory. The sharing of food remained a potent symbol of community and intimacy. Queer lovers met in secret to share meals, simple fare of bread, cheese, roasted vegetables, and watered wine, each bite a small act of resistance and affirmation. These moments offered refuge from the harsh realities of village life. In the vast tapestry of medieval rural existence, queer lives wove threads of courage, creativity, and resilience. Their stories, though often obscured, illuminate the diverse humanity that has always inhabited the land, reminding us that love and identity have never been confined by time or place. In the dim glow of candlelit chambers, where the musk of burning tallow mingled with the scent of parchment and ink, medieval scholars and scribes labored to preserve the knowledge of their age. These learned men and women inhabited monasteries, universities, and courts, where books were rare treasures and words carried power beyond measure. Among their manuscripts, some contained veiled reflections of desires that defied the strictures imposed by church and society. Scholars debated theology, philosophy, and the natural world, yet beneath their erudition lay the complex realities of human emotion. Some wrestled with their own forbidden feelings, finding solace in poetry or allegory, expressing love through carefully chosen words that concealed as much as they revealed. Their writings, though cloaked in Latin and metaphor, offer tantalizing hints of queer identities navigating a world of dogma. Universities, burgeoning centers of learning, gathered young men from various regions, creating spaces where friendships deepened amidst the rigors of study. The close quarters of dormitories and the intensity of academic life fostered bonds that sometimes transcended intellectual camaraderie. Letters and personal notes, preserved through centuries, hint at passions lived quietly in shadow. Religious authorities remained vigilant, condemning acts deemed sinful and often punishing transgressors harshly. Yet, enforcement fluctuated with politics and local customs. Some clerics exercised discretion or empathy, recognizing the humanity beneath the condemnation. Confessionals could be sites of judgment or unexpected mercy, depending on the individual confessor. Women's roles in scholarly life were limited, but some women found ways to engage intellectually and socially, sometimes through correspondence or patronage. Their voices, though scarce in official records, hint at complex inner worlds and desires often at odds with societal expectations. Art and literature flourished as vehicles of coded expression. Troubadours crafted verses layered with allegory, while illuminated texts featured imagery that hinted at alternative loves. These cultural creations formed a hidden dialogue between creators and audiences, preserving queer experiences in fragile form. The communal act of sharing food and drink persisted as a potent symbol of connection. In scholars' halls or quiet chambers, secret gatherings around modest tables, rich with bread, cheese, and spice wine, became moments of intimacy and solidarity. These shared meals nurtured not only bodies but spirits, fostering resilience in a hostile environment.